Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, September 19th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to continue on with our Week 4 predictions. We're going to do Tennessee at Oklahoma, a very, very fun game, and Josh Heupel's homecoming back to Norman, Oklahoma. Then we'll get to a little bit of talk around Utah at Oklahoma State, a very interesting game that just got a little bit more interesting last night. I'll break down exactly what I mean in the second segment. Then we'll get into a little talk around all the other games, top games at least, that I'll break down and give at least a general pick for. We won't necessarily give an exact number pick, but want to make sure I give you guys an idea of my lean in those games. And then got to get into some questions for this upcoming week. We did some yesterday, going to do some more today, including one around Billy Napier, who is still the head coach of Florida right about now. And then we have some hot takes for you in the Week 4 edition of Hot Take Thursday. Very, very fun group of hot takes, and one that you're going to want to be on the lookout for tonight, but we'll break that down when we get there. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen is to use that super chat at the bottom of that chat on the Sports Network page. You'll see that little $sign. Click on that, add any question, comment you like, add your name. It will pop up on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive as possible, especially in the season. Definitely want you guys to have as much say in the show as possible. So definitely utilize that if you can, and then utilize the GSMCpodcast.net page if that's a little bit easier for you. But sometimes that super chat can be really, really easy. So utilize that if you'd like. But let's jump right in, because this is about to get crazy. This game is absolutely awesome over there at Norman, Oklahoma this upcoming weekend. And it's not just about, these teams. It's about these storylines going in. Josh Heupel led Oklahoma to a national title in 2000, is one of the most beloved players for quite some time, came back as the offensive coordinator, left under some interesting circumstances. He put together a pretty good offense, got let go. They brought in Lincoln Riley, so didn't necessarily affect too much, and obviously worked out for both parties, but going to be a really interesting reception in Norman, Oklahoma for Josh Heupel. I think there's going to be some fans that give him a little bit of a cheer, but then immediately start booing. There will be some fans that don't give him a cheer until the clock hits zero, and I understand both approaches, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that works. He poked kind of fun at it, saying they're definitely going to let us work in silence. They absolutely won't, but I understand what he's saying there. It's going to be really, really fun to see him back where he, got his start and where he's a real legend for them, at least in terms of playing. And then Oklahoma got a couple injuries that have to be figured out. It sounds like Nick Anderson is going to go, and we'll talk about him here in a second. And then Branson Hickman really has to go. This offensive line needs as much help as they can possibly get, particularly against this interior defensive line for Tennessee that is so deep. So getting Branson Hickman back would be as big of a thing for this game as really anything on the board. But players to watch, got to start with Nick Anderson. If he is back on the field, he is the best wide receiver on the field for Oklahoma. Period. End of story. He is such a huge player for them, and one of those guys that I think there's so much energy around the Oklahoma program. One of the reasons why Dillon Gabriel is at Oregon right now is they wanted to push the ball downfield. That's the way they want to go about business going forward, and they haven't necessarily been able to do that. And a lot of that has to do with the O-line, and they're going to have to play really well in this game. But part of it is they don't have that many receivers that really scare you downfield. Deion Burks is a terrifying guy, and he's someone that you're going to have to keep a cap on, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But Nick Anderson is the guy that opens up all of that. He's the guy that takes up the attention of the safety over top, or the linebacker creeps a little bit out to help double team him, and then you maybe have a Deion Burks downfield. Maybe you have someone else downfield that you can get the ball to, Brennan Thompson, an absolute speedster. The reality is this Oklahoma offense can't just be throwing the ball downfield. It can't just be deep threats. You got to have a guy that's going to open up those holes. Nick Anderson is the guy to do that. So very important player, and definitely a great time to get him back for Oklahoma, that's for sure. And then Billy Bowman. This is a guy that you likely know very well, one of the best safeties in the entire country, and you can imagine why he's on this list. You have to make sure that this defense is in accordance, that they're in alignment, because Tennessee can beat you in a hurry. And I promise you, if you get beat over top a couple of times in this game, your offense might not have the firepower to return that. So Billy Bowman getting a pick, Billy Bowman just playing really sound football on Saturday, is almost a must for Oklahoma to be able to win this one. But then on the other side, Deshaun Bishop, I think, is huge in this game. When you talk about the Tennessee run game, so much is about Dylan Sampson. And frankly, I've been as impressed about him as really any other running back in the country to this point. That being said, I think you need a little bit of a bruiser, and Dylan Sampson can do this all well as well, but Deshaun Bishop is just a little bit of a bigger back, and I think he'll give Dylan Sampson a little bit of a breather, and also bruise up these Oklahoma linebackers and D-line just a little bit during that time. So I think he's a hugely important player just to keep these drives moving. On that 3rd and 1, on that 4th and 1, you can hand the ball to this guy, and he can get those 2 yards, and maybe in the process, he can kind of wear down this Oklahoma defense just a little bit. And then finally, Arian Carter. We talked about this a little bit after last week's game against Tulane, but Oklahoma's doing way more quarterback run game, and it's something that they likely have to do. In fact, it's something that we'll talk about with this game, but Arian Carter's going to be huge. He's going to be a guy that just keeps everything at bay. He keeps Jackson Arnold in the pocket. He keeps this run game from really getting going like they have been in the past, and then maybe from time to time he makes that big-time play. He gets that pick on Jackson Arnold, where that's what happened last week against Tulane. He was pressured, threw a pick to a linebacker that took it back to the house. So it's one of those players that is so important every single week, but especially with a guy like Jackson Arnold on the other side, you're going to have to make sure this defense has everything in accordance, and that's the guy that's going to do it for Tennessee. For Tennessee, I think the keys to the game, let your D-line eat. When you talk about one of the biggest mismatches in this game, frankly, I think maybe the biggest mismatch in this game is that Tennessee D-line against that Oklahoma O-line. They are all over the place over there at Oklahoma. They have a couple of injuries that are not helping by any means, and we'll see if Branson Hickman can get back, because I think if he doesn't, then Dominic Bailey and Bryson Eason on the inside is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with, I'll be totally honest. And then on the outside, they feel a little bit better about their tackles over there at Oklahoma, but James Pierce Jr. in this pass rush is going to cause all types of problems. So it's going to be one of those things that I think Tennessee is just going to sit back. They're going to say, we're not going to let them take the top off this defense. We're not going to let them get that big play that gets the crowd involved. And then we're going to let our 4 guys up front just dominate your 5. And I think that's a real possibility in this game. Then maybe you'll adjust as things go if things change. But as of right now, it looks like this is a pretty well way to go about business, is just letting those 4 guys up front just go to work on this offensive line. And then get Nico going early. I think this is something that people are slightly overlooking as we go into this game. There's been more talk about it as we've gotten closer, but this is his first true road game. This is an entirely different thing for what Nico Iamaleava is about to walk into. He has to be able to get into a rhythm. He has to be able to get comfortable and get his heart rate just a little bit down. He's been 71 completion, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's been really incredible. I'm not necessarily taking anything away from the kid. This is just a little bit different on Saturday. It's just going to be a little bit different for him. Get him comfortable early, and then he's going to look like that guy in the second half. But if you don't get him comfortable and this crowd gets after him a little bit, maybe you see some of those rookie mistakes we haven't quite seen yet. And then keep a cap on this OU offense. We talked about it a second ago, but OU is outmatched in a number of places in this game. They have so many different places where I lean Tennessee, and frankly, other than linebacker and DB, I think I'd lean Tennessee in this game. But that being said, the Oklahoma wide receivers against this back end for Tennessee might be a favorable matchup, and you have to get O-line protection, obviously, for this to happen, but you got to be able to hit some shots downfield. On the other side, Tennessee's got to make sure that doesn't happen. This crowd will get involved in a hurry if you let them get downfield, and there's going to be a number of things that play into this. Obviously, the pass rush being as good as it is at Tennessee helps this a ton, because your back end doesn't have to block for quite as much, but it's going to be one of those things that you let OU get that one big play to Deion Burks down the field, you might not be able to see another play, because there's going to be so many different things that come into play, like the fan base, like all of the different, like the worries that Tennessee might have had coming into the season that they haven't had to face yet. It's always the old saying, everyone has a plan until you punch them in the face. Maybe if OU punches you in the face, then you fall over. But if you have the ability to sustain that, or if you have the ability to just not take the punch at all, you're definitely going to take that, and you'll see what happens on the other side. And then Oklahoma, how can they win? You have to get Jackson Arnold running. And frankly, I don't necessarily love that this is one of the keys to victory for Oklahoma right about now. He is their leading rusher, though, and he shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the way they're going about business. But with that O-line, you're not going to have the same amount of holes. So you have to use the quarterback draw game. You have to use a little bit of quarterback power, anything that gets your offense moving forward, because right now, Oklahoma doesn't have a lot of options for that. So they have to be able to utilize all of their options. I think Taylor Tatum, the running back, is going to be a special player. I think this is a lot to put on his shoulders this early. So you're going to have to utilize that quarterback run game. You're going to have to make life tough on him, and then maybe you can keep this back end at bay, or maybe you can pull the back end down into the box and then hit him over top. So you're going to have to get Jackson Arnold on the ground. You're going to have a big game from him, because that's really the only way they're going to be able to hold this D-line at bay the entire game. And then hold the Tennessee run game at bay. That's the big-time goal here, because we talk about the deep passing game, and it's the same thing we do pretty much around the country, whether you want to talk about Ole Miss or Texas or Tennessee or any of the elite offenses. It's all about the pass, right? Everyone loves to see the downfield pass. Everyone loves to see Quinn Ewers going through all his progressions, Nico Iamaleava stretching the field downfield. The run game is where they make their money. The run game is where everything is set up. And if OU, who is very good against the run in a number of different ways, mainly because if Danny Stutzman's on the field, you are going to be good against the run. I think he's the best linebacker in the country and a guy that probably has to play his best football on Saturday if they want to win. But overall, I think he's one of those guys that you can't let those 2-yard runs turn into 4, or those 4-yard runs turn into 6, or it's going to be a really long night. And then you're going to have to bring Billy Bowman or Peyton Bowen down into the box, and then maybe you have a deep shot over the top from Tennessee. So Oklahoma's going to have to play kind of a tightrope walk. This is such a hard defense to prepare for that maybe you do have to sell out just a little bit to stop the run, and then just bet on yourself to handle the wide receivers on the back end. You have an elite group of DBs, so maybe that's the best way forward for this defense on Saturday, because if they can't get the run game going, then maybe Nico gets a little bit more nervous and you can take advantage of a mistake. And then finally, get that one big play. Oklahoma is one of those places that this fan base will get as involved as anyone in the country, but you got to give them a reason, especially early on in the season with all of these offensive struggles. They're waiting for that moment, right? They're waiting for everything to open up and for the skies to, or the clouds to part and everything to, the angels to start singing in this offense. It could happen in this game, and it could happen in a hurry, and it's one of those things that Deion Burks is so dangerous. He has to have a big-time effect on this game. I think Brennan Thompson is someone that just throw the ball up and let him run under it. He is such a special athlete, has track speed, not football speed. Definitely want to utilize him. Point being, get that big play. Whether it's Deion Burks downfield or it's Peyton Bowen on the other side taking a ball down back to the house, you need that one big play, because not only will your fan base get involved, they'll feel like, okay, this is the flip in the season that we very much needed, but Tennessee has not taken a punch yet. You give out that punch, then maybe Tennessee falls over, and then you have the ability to beat them. But overall, I think this is as fun of a game as you could possibly have. This is so much fun. You have the behind the scenes with Josh Heupel coming back to his old place, old stomping grounds. You have the coaching battles of elite defensive coordinator in Brent Venables against an elite offensive coordinator in Josh Heupel. I know they're not the OC and the DC, but are the play callers, at least for the most part, in those offenses. Those are elite guys, and it's going to be incredible to watch them go to work. I think, honestly, this might be one of the most fun games just across the board in this weekend, but more than anything, I just can't take... I can't take this Oklahoma offensive line right now. I can't bet on them to be able to stand up against this Tennessee defensive front. I don't necessarily feel great that Tennessee's not going to be able to get loose a couple of times downfield. Now, I do think Oklahoma's going to keep this close. I think the Oklahoma defense is going to play really inspired football. I think it's going to look really good for about 3.5 quarters. I think Tennessee might score a late touchdown to make this look better. I just think Tennessee has too many answers and Oklahoma has too many questions right now. Now, I do think this Oklahoma team will slowly get better and frankly turn into a really good team throughout time. But that O-line is just too far from where it needs to be to play this game right now. So I do have Tennessee winning that one. Frankly, you could convince me the other way. I think it's going to be a really, really fun game. And although I picked Tennessee by 10, I probably could have easily flipped that to Oklahoma by 3 just because that atmosphere is going to be so crazy. And maybe Tennessee is one of those teams that they've been able to roll for the first couple of weeks. You punch them in the mouth, maybe things get interesting for them. But it'll be so much fun to watch that one. Cannot wait for that one in Norman, Oklahoma. But let's take our first break here. When we come back, we're going to do Utah at Oklahoma State. There's a little bit of a change to this game last night, and I'll break down exactly what we mean after this, but going to be a really fun one in Stillwater. So stick around. We'll be right back with that.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down that Tennessee-Oklahoma game, going to be absolutely incredible in Norman, Oklahoma this upcoming weekend. I do have Tennessee winning by 10, going to be a very fun game. I just think Tennessee pulls away a little bit late, but going to be a really fun one that you could easily convince me that OU is going to find a way to win because it's just college football. One of those things that things go a lot differently than we think they're going to go in about week 4. So going to be really awesome to watch that one unfold. This one might be more interesting for a couple of different reasons, and the biggest one for me is it just changed last night. There were a couple of lines that were out there that said Utah -2. In fact, I made all the graphics for this segment with Utah -2 on it. Then I look a little bit later in the day, it's Oklahoma State -2.5, and everyone's wondering what happened. It happened in the blink of an eye. In about 45 minutes, it flipped from that number to -2.5 on the Oklahoma State side. And the debates immediately started, obviously. Debates about, is Cam Rising healthy? Is he the guy that is going to be trotting out there with the first team on Saturday? And frankly, I don't think he's going to be. I don't think you see a line change like this very late in the process unless that's the case. And frankly, if you know anything about Utah football around Cam Rising, not surprising that we didn't know about this until 48 hours before this game happened. So not necessarily a crazy revelation by any means that he might not go, but changes this game drastically. There's no two ways about that. Isaac Wilson walking into Stillwater for his first true road start is quite the thing to do. No doubt about that. As a true freshman, he's going to be put to the test. There's no two ways about that. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Cam Rising goes out there and Vegas just had it wrong. They had the wrong intel. That rarely happens, though. I'll just be totally honest. So it's going to be interesting to watch that unfold, but let's get into some players to watch here. Dejon Stanley just became that much more important. If it's Isaac Wilson on the field, you need that running back that can make plays happen, especially in the pass game, because that's an easy dump off, right? It's an easy dump off. It's an easy wheel route that you can get the ball in his hands and then just let him work after the catch. He needs as many of those options on Saturday, and if he doesn't get them early on, it's going to be a long day at the office for this offense. That's just the reality. They have to get this guy out in space, and they have to give Isaac Wilson, who seems to be the starter now, they have to give him as many good options near the line of scrimmage as they possibly can. This might be one of the best options they have, so it has to be huge in this game. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Teo Johnson is such a special player on that back end. He is so good, so long, plays really good in run defense, but also can play plenty in pass defense and coverage, just playing zone. He's a very, very talented player, and one of those guys that you look at this Oklahoma State offense, obviously coming into the season we were talking about Ollie Gordon. We're not talking about Ollie Gordon too much anymore when it comes to this offense. They're going to have to take a couple of shots deep, especially if they can't get him going. Maybe Teo Johnson makes the play that changes this entire game, especially with the quarterback situation being what it is at Utah. On the other side, I think Brennan Presley is interesting here because Utah is so good between the tackles. They're so solid up front in that front seven that maybe you have to get him out on that edge. And also on the other side, Ollie Gordon has not been good. You haven't been able to get that run game going. The offensive line does not look like an offensive line that has six guys on that roster that have started at different times, that have played a lot of snaps on that team. Doesn't look like that right about now. Getting guys on the edge can change all that. Getting guys on the edge, stretching out these defensive ends just a little bit more, making these linebackers think about that just a little bit more can change everything. And he can open a number of running lanes for Ollie Gordon. And I think we'll find pretty quickly that Ollie Gordon sees one hole. He gets one 12-yard run after a 10-yard run. He starts piling these up. it's going to be impossible to stop the kid. I just think he hasn't gotten his feet under him, hasn't gotten much confidence, so it's been tough for him to really get upfield. But I think once he gets a couple under his belt, he's going to get going pretty quickly. And then on the other side, Obi Ezigbo has been really, really impressive. One of those guys that, I don't know if anyone saw this quote by Mike Gundy, but said he was affordable, and that's why he's at Oklahoma right about now. Came from Gannon University, so gives you an idea why he was affordable, but this is a very talented player. This dude can do absolutely everything on the football field, and he's going to have to get home a couple of times. Whether it's Cam Rising or it's Isaac Wilson, heating these guys up is going to be a huge way to go about business for them, and I cannot wait to see what this kid can do, especially on that big-time game for not the first time since he's been in Oklahoma or Oklahoma State. Obviously, Arkansas was huge, but this one's obviously a little bit bigger, it being a conference matchup. How can Utah win on Saturday? And it got a little bit more complicated, I won't lie to you, but use Dorian Singer as a mismatch because this is the guy, I was talking about Nick Anderson when I was talking about the Tennessee-Oklahoma game. He's the guy that opens things up. You have a tight end in Brant Kuthi that's going to be such a problem. You have a guy in Money Parks that can get over top and cause insane amounts of issues. We talked about Dijon Stanley out of the backfield. There are so many ways they can attack them. The reality is you need a guy to eat up space. You need a guy to eat up a couple of defenders pretty much every play. Dorian Singer can do that. He can run an out route, and you can have the linebacker go out with him while the safety tamps down, or a corner goes with him on a post while the safety plays down on him, and then you have Money Parks on the other side. There are a million different ways that he makes a difference on this offense without even touching the ball. He could be one of the most important players for them on Saturday and only make like 2 or 3 catches for 25 yards. He is just someone that opens up just about everything else, and especially with someone like Isaac Wilson, you got to make sure you have that mismatch to throw him the ball first, but then to open up some of the other stuff for the other players because he's going to need those windows to be relatively wide if he's going to be successful on Saturday. And then find the run game early. This is a crowd that will get on top of you in a hurry. And I know this being a 4 p.m. kickoff is about the biggest break that Utah has gotten in this because you do not want to be under that night sky in Stillwater. I'm just being totally honest. It is as dark as it gets. It is terrifying. And there are a number of things that happen in that stadium that don't happen anywhere else in the country. So get that run game going. Take the crowd out of it just a little bit. You won't be able to do it the entire game, I can promise you that. But being able to at least keep them at bay early on in the game and let these guys get into a rhythm, especially if it's Isaac Wilson back there. If you don't get the run game going, you are not going to be successful. They are going to be able to kind of tee off on you, and this defense with all of these incredible players on the back end and at the linebacker room are going to be a problem. So find Micah Bernard, find Mike Mitchell, find Dijon Stanley at times, and just get everything going in the run game, and then passing lanes will open for guys like maybe Cam Rising, although I'm feeling very not confident about that, or maybe Isaac Wilson. You have to make sure that there's openings for these guys to pass downfield. Run game's the only way to do that. And then finally, just don't let Ollie Gordon get going. He's been very, very rough through the first couple of weeks, and not all on him. This O-line has been not nearly where they should be right now, averaging only 3.5 yards per carry. That's not going to be enough on Saturday. That's just the reality. They're going to have to get more from him because this Utah team is going to be very stingy up front. And if you let them, tee off on Ollie Gordon the entire day, the back end's going to be plenty fine with Nate Ritchie and Teo Johnson and all of these athletic players on the back end. Utah will be more than fine to just handle Ollie Gordon on the front and then let Alan Bowman make that one mistake that he's been good about thus far not making, but it feels like it's about to come at some point. So it's one of those things that you don't want to be the team that gets Ollie Gordon running downfield. You don't want to be the team that unleashes that monster. So try to keep him under wraps as best you can, and then if Alan Bowman beats you, I think you tip your cap and you keep it moving, honestly. But Oklahoma State, what can they do? Use all of the extra energy. This is something that maybe I'm looking into just a little bit too much, but I think it's not being talked about enough. Oklahoma State has been a fabric in this conference for quite some time. Now, have they been the top team in the conference? Not necessarily, but did go to the championship last year, lost to Texas, had a very, very good season. They come back this year, and they're not the favorite to win the conference. They returned so many guys, returned the best running back in the country by a lot of people's standards. I think it's Ashton Jeanty, but that's beside the point. I think there's a number of people that pointed at this team and said, why are they not the Big 12 champions? And I know they did that. I know they said that this team is coming in from the Pac-12, a conference that is a little less physical. They're not going to be able to walk into Stillwater, Oklahoma and get a win. All of that is baked into this. And maybe it's something that doesn't matter too much to the players, but I have to imagine it matters some. I have to imagine all this talk around what Utah can do and what Kansas State can do has made them just a little bit mad, because they're the team that's been around for quite some time. They're the team that's been the most successful of this group in the Big 12, and they're the team that was just coming off a Big 12 title run. So a lot of things that I feel like might just play into this a little bit more, and might just have those guys strapping up their chin strap just a little bit tighter on Saturday around 3:30. But the other part of this, get after whatever quarterback is back there. I think it's going to be Isaac Wilson, but I am very nervous, so I'm just going to leave that at that. I think either one of these guys is going to have an issue if you can get after him. For Cam Rising, his average depth of target goes from 5.9 when blitzed to 15.6 when not blitzed. And obviously, that's across the board. There's going to be a little bit of a step back there. Doesn't necessarily have to be that aggressive. And his numbers overall, when being blitzed, are just a little all over the place. There's moments where it works out for him, obviously, with a couple of cover zeros that you can exploit. But then on the other side, there's a couple that he just hasn't looked all that great. And on the flip side of that, though, has only been sacked once this season. So it's not necessarily easy to get home. It is easy to get after him a little bit. It's easy to pressure him. It is easy, to blitz him and to get after him just a little bit. And then you have the ability to, at the very least, keep a cap on this offense and not let them make that big-time play that could possibly silence your crowd. And then finally, get the O-line moving forward. I don't exactly know what this looks like. Maybe they're more comfortable with zone scheme, so just give them one guy that they have to block and let him go downhill. Maybe they do more pulling concepts and let these guys get their feet under them and get running forward before they make that block. I don't know what this looks like. The reality is you have to get these guys moving downfield against a very good defensive front, because if you don't, I don't know that Alan Bowman is ready to do this. It's not that I don't agree or don't, think Alan Bowman is capable of being a really good player. He has had so much on his shoulders the first couple of weeks, and it's worked out because the defenses on the other side are not great at stopping the pass. Utah's going to be able to stop the pass. You're going to need Ollie Gordon in this game because you just need a counterpunch. You're not going to be able to survive in this game if you don't have a counterpunch to what has been a very prolific passing attack. The wheels could fall off fairly quickly is the point I'm trying to make. So get that running game going, get this O-line going in. You need more from that left side of that offensive line. Dalton Cooper has kind of bounced around just a little bit with some injuries, but you got to get more from Cole Birmingham at that left tackle position. You have to make sure that Dalton Cooper is holding down that left tackle, because that's the way they like to run. They like to run to that left side of the formation and let Ollie Gordon go to work. They haven't been able to do that thus far, and that's really been the crux of their season more than anything else, is the fact that Ollie Gordon has been a no-show and this offense has looked downright stagnant. And I have a different prediction on my screen right now because I wrote the notes yesterday, but I do think Oklahoma State wins this one 23-17. I had 23-21 before Cam Rising went out, so didn't change my prediction in terms of Oklahoma State winning this game. I think it's going to be really tough to walk into that environment. And frankly, even if Cam Rising was on the field even before all of this stuff happened with the line movement and everything, I would still be worried about his health. I'd still be worried about the ability for him to make all the throws he needs to make with a hurt finger on his throwing hand. So I was still going to go Oklahoma State's direction. Feel a little bit more good about that going forward if Zach Wilson is under center. So took a couple of points away from Utah. I still think this is going to be an absolute slugfest in terms of defensive battle, but it's going to be really fun to watch these teams go at it. And I think it's going to set the tone for what is going to be likely a really crazy season around the Big 12. Maybe these two guys, whoever wins it, is a shoo-in for that Big 12 title. But going to be one of the more fun games this upcoming week. And if Cam Rising goes, then it gets a lot more interesting. If Isaac Wilson goes, then it's interesting just in a totally different way. We'll see what the freshman has in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and maybe he can get the win. And then you're having a very, very fun conversation over there in Utah. But it's going to be awesome to watch those two big-time matchups. We broke down USC, Michigan yesterday if you want to go check that out, because that's another one, kind of like Tennessee, Oklahoma, where you think you know everything about those two teams. One has looked incredible. One has been kind of limping. everything changes in week 4, and we'll break that down throughout the show, but it's going to be awesome to watch those games unfold. Let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to break down, I believe, 6 more games for you that just kind of jumped off the page to me. A couple for not so good reasons, a couple for very good reasons, and I'll break those down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Utah-Oklahoma State game, one that got a little bit of a wrench thrown into it last night. It sounds like Cam Rising might not go, although all we know is a line moved very, very aggressively last night on this game. Went from about 2.5 or 2 to favor to Utah to 2.5 to Oklahoma State side. So quite the flip. There's no two ways about that, and really can only mean one thing, but we'll hold out. We'll see what happens in the next little bit, and we'll definitely update you if he is not or if he is the starter going into that game. But let's get into the other top 4 week 4 games, because we have a number that are going to be really, really fun, and feel like we got to give some shine to the game that's going on in Lincoln, Nebraska, because the reality is there was no one that circled this game. And I understand it was going to be a very interesting game to see where Nebraska was at going into the Big Ten. People had expectations for Nebraska, not so much for Illinois. And maybe we were just outright wrong about that one. This is a very, very fun team. Luke Altmaier's playing really good quarterback. Caden Finnegan, is playing really, really solid football. A lot of really talented players over there at Illinois. And I think it's one of those interesting things where Nebraska's defense is going to be a lot stingier against the run than Colorado is. So you're going to have to get more from Dylan Raiola. That's the end-all be-all in this game. This is the game where he really has to kind of grow up and make those really great decisions down the stretch. Now, Colorado was another big-time moment, don't get me wrong, but the holes are going to be a little bit thinner in the Illinois back end, and the Illinois back end might be a little bit attackable, but definitely not quite as much as that Colorado team, and you won't be able to run the ball just over and over and over again and ride your way to a victory. Maybe you will, but I'd be a little bit shocked if that was the way that Nebraska went about business. So you're going to have to see more from Dylan Raiola. You're going to have to see him mature a lot on Friday night, and cannot wait to see this on Friday night, because these two teams, the way they've been playing to start the year, deserve a little bit of a standalone game that everyone has their eyes on. So very much like that, but it's going to be really, really fun to watch this one. I think it's one of those games that everyone really likes the Huskers. Everyone's a little bit questionable about what Illinois is right now. Maybe things happened on Saturday that we do not expect, and maybe Illinois comes out of this one as the dark horse in the Big Ten, not the team that we normally think. But overall, I am going to go Nebraska. I do think they are the more solid, more complete team, and I think Illinois is one of those teams that is going to be able to play good football pretty much every week, not be able to be easy to beat, because they're not going to hand you a ton. But I also think when Nebraska has as many dudes as they have, as much depth as they have comparative to Illinois, it's just going to be a little bit tough. It's going to be a little bit tough sledding, especially offensively, and I expect Nebraska to win. Now, Illinois does have a little bit of a kind of equalizer. They've been +8 on turnover margin this year. Nebraska +3. So maybe that's the big difference. Maybe they can get a pick or two from the young kid and make all the difference in this game. But as of right now, I am going to lean Nebraska. I feel pretty confident in that pick. But Illinois, I felt pretty confident in picking Kansas against them. So maybe they should feel good about me not necessarily liking them in this game. And then moving on, Kansas-West Virginia is a very weird game. Going into this season, I think this was one of those where I looked at it and said, that's going to have something to do with what the Big 12 is this year. Didn't necessarily know how aggressive it was going to be, but it felt like both these teams were primed to make some noise, to at least be in the conversation down the stretch. It doesn't seem like that anymore. Kansas has a loss to Illinois and then to UNLV in back-to-back weeks. West Virginia falls in week 1 to Penn State and then falls last week in heartbreaking fashion to Pitt. There's so many different things that have played into the first couple of weeks of the season that have kind of just taken a little bit of juice out of this one. I'll be totally honest. It's going to be a really fun game nonetheless, but it's one that both very badly need to win. Kansas's offense has been all over the place since Andy Kotelnicki walked out the door, and Jalen Daniels has just not been effective throwing the ball nearly as much as he was before. So maybe that Andy Kotelnicki hire is the best in the entire country, not only because of what he's doing at Penn State, but because of what he left behind at Kansas, because it's still some very talented kids in that room, but the scheme is not nearly where it needs to be. And then both these teams are going to try to beat you on the ground. That's the way they go about business. C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White for West Virginia. You have Devin Neal, you have Daniel Highshaw, and Jalen Daniels, obviously, running the ball on the other side. That's going to be the way this goes about business, and frankly, there's a number of different ways that could go. There's a number of different ways. Maybe the West Virginia defense plays a little bit better on Saturday and is able to stifle this attack, that maybe you force him into some passing downs and make life tough for Jalen Daniels. On the flip side, maybe West Virginia just can't get anything going passing the ball, because that's been a big-time problem early on in the season, and Kansas can just tee off on these running backs all day. So it's going to be a really interesting battle. It's one of those that you look at it and you really thought early on in the season this would be a fun, dark horse battle in the Big 12, that one of these teams winning would kickstart them into something special, and maybe it still could. The Big 12 could get absolutely crazy and everyone have 2 losses at the end of the day, but both these teams at the end of the day are walking into this one as a must-win, and they are viewing this as, we have to get back on track if we want any shot to salvage the season. Someone's going to come out really angry. Someone's going to come out really upset. Give me the Mountaineers. I think they are very, very mad about the way that last game ended. I think Kansas is a team that just doesn't have enough answers offensively. I think if you can force them into passing downs, they're not going to be effective. So as of right now, I think I'd go West Virginia on this one. It's going to be a really fun matchup, and whoever walks out a winner, you're still alive. Whoever walks out a loser, you are on a really weird road to a very disappointing season. But moving forward, Rutgers going into Virginia Tech is awesome. I cannot wait for this game for a number of different reasons, because I circled both of these teams going into the season, and I feel pretty good about what about Rutgers right about now. Don't feel quite as good about Virginia Tech. They have yet to find anything really going in this offense. Now, they still have plenty of guys that can make plays. Kyron Drones with his legs. They have Bayshal Tootin, that's a very talented running back. They have guys that can make plays, no doubt about that. But they got to find more in the pass game. They have to find Jalen Lane, I believe. Yes, Jalen Lane. You have to find those guys in space. You have to be able to get Ollie Jennings a couple of big-time plays. Whatever this looks like, Virginia Tech just has to get this offense going. On the other side, it's going to be a lot of Kyle Mine, the guy. If they cannot stop him early, he's going to take that energy out of that building in a second. I can promise you that. Kyle Mine, the guy, has 375 yards, 8.1 yards per carry thus far throughout the season. He's been absolutely incredible. He is awesome. He does everything you'd want him to do on the football field, and he's one of those guys that I just cannot wait to watch every single weekend. So absolutely love him. I think they're off a little bit of a bye week last week for Rutgers, so a little bit more well-rested. Didn't necessarily get tested too much in the first couple of weeks, so walking into Blacksburg is going to be a totally different battle, and we'll see what happens. I think this is one of those games that I'm going to lean Virginia Tech in, and I think frankly, if this was a neutral site, I'd probably lean Rutgers. If it was at Rutgers, I'd definitely lean Rutgers, but I don't know. I think that home field advantage is going to do just enough. I think Virginia Tech's running game is going to be able to at least slow down Rutgers enough on the offensive side of the ball, and I don't know. It's one of those games that I think I could throw a dart at the dartboard and feel as confident as I am right now making this pick, but I am going to go Virginia Tech. I am going to go for them to beat Rutgers, and it's going to be, if Rutgers can get this win before I finish this up, they could go 9-3. I just want that on everyone's radar. This is a game that could totally change the season for the Rutgers, for the Knights, and it could be so much fun to watch them throughout the rest of the season. this is the moment. If they can win this one, then I feel like this is a program that has as much energy as anyone in the country. If they fall, then you're asking some questions looking at a terrifying Big Ten schedule coming up. I had to talk about this one, and it's not that it's one of the best games of the weekend. It's not that it's anything crazy. It's that I don't know when the bleeding stops. I have to know when the bleeding stops. I want to be the first person there when it does. Frankly, I don't know if it does in this game, but the reality is Florida State is reeling. There's no two ways to put it. They are all over the place. They have very little discernible plan offensively. They have a bunch of guys, but no discernible plan defensively. They got a little bit better last week, so I don't want to tear them down too much, but at the end of the day, it looks like a lot of guys with not a lot of organization right now over there at Florida State. For Cal, they've been kind of rolling. They walked into Auburn, got a big-time win when Jaden Ott was essentially a non-factor in that game. You had so many different things go right in that game, and they played really, really solid defensive football against a team that can definitely take the top off you in Auburn. So it's going to be incredible to watch this one unfold. This is the moment where we talked about it last week. Florida State's just got to win one of these ones. They have to be able to at least get in the win column, subside their fans for 6 days, and then figure out where you are, because that's the only way forward. It's not going to be a pretty season. You're going to have to wade through some very, very dangerous waters to get to the end of this one, and then maybe you'll be on a little bit calmer of waters, and you'll be able to figure all this out. But overall, I think it's one of those things that I just cannot touch Florida State right now. I don't think there's a world or any team that they could play right now where I would say, okay, that's Florida State, let's move forward, no worries. Cal is a good team. They're going to be able to be coached really, really well. They have a Twitter fan base that has become one of my favorite over the last couple of days. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But a very, very fun matchup. One of those that it's an ACC matchup. And it sounds crazy to say that, but it absolutely is. And we'll see if Cal can keep this thing roll into ACC schedule with a big-time win. And we'll see if Florida State can salvage this ship, if they can get everything a little bit back on track and win 4 games. I know it sounds crazy to getting it back on track leads to winning 4 games, but that's where they are right now. There's no two ways about that. So it's going to be awesome to watch that one unfold. Then you had Baylor, Colorado, and we'll talk about this one a little bit later, so I won't waste too much time here, but I love this matchup. I think it's going to be so much fun. You have Dave Aranda on the other side calling defensive plays against an elite quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. It's going to be so much fun to see what he throws at him, how he makes life uncomfortable, how many times he blitzes, or does he trust the 4 guys up front to do what they need to do, and then drop 7, 8 guys in coverage every play. I tend to believe the latter is the way that they'll go, but we'll see what happens there. And then on the Baylor side, they don't know who their quarterback is quite right about now. Daquan Finn went out with an injury last week, and Sawyer Robertson came in and played really good football. He was very, very clean throughout that game and was one of those guys that absolutely gave you a really good chance to win there. They have an or on that depth chart, which is very, very daunting for every fan base out there. If you see an or next to your quarterback, not necessarily what you love to see, but I do think Daquan Finn will likely get the start here, and I think he likely will keep the job going forward, but it's one of those things that throws a little bit of a wrench into this, and it might just be what decides this game, how they handle this quarterback situation. And then from the Colorado perspective, this is about you taking the physicality that you had in the Nebraska game, taking the energy you had in the Colorado State game, and combining them. We need to see Colorado week over week, not just play this incredible game on Saturday and then the next day play a little bit flat or just not come out as strong as they need to. We have to see it over multiple weeks. This is a huge game for them, one of those games that I think could define a lot of what Colorado is going forward, and I definitely was wildly impressed with what they did against Colorado State. If they get a big-time win here, I'll be even more impressed. It'll be an absolutely huge win, but I think I'm going to lean Baylor here. It sounds a little bit crazy coming out of my mouth, honestly, but I do think Dave Aranda is going to be able to cause enough problems. I think the run game is not going to be able to get going for Colorado, which is not a surprise by any means. Isaiah Auguste seems like he might be able to go, so we'll see what happens there, and that will be very, very fun to watch. But as of right now, I just have to lean Baylor in this one. I think Colorado's a really good team and absolutely has every chance to win this game. I think there's enough stuff going in Baylor's direction that I'll lean the Bears in this one and maybe have to eat some crow on Monday. But finally, Kansas State is heading over to BYU. We talked about this one when we talked about the upset potential, It definitely is. This one is going to get absolutely crazy. BYU has an elite atmosphere. Kansas State is a team that has played one good game of football, and that's about it. And we don't really know what this team is quite yet. It felt like they found something against Arizona, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they're still a little bit all over the place trying to figure out who they are, and we'll find out on Saturday, that is for sure. I think this KSU defense needs to be much better than it has been. Jake Retzlaff is one of those guys that can cause so many problems for you. With his arm, with his leg, they have a really good receiver in Chase Roberts that is going to be an interesting matchup to watch, him against this back end with Keenan Garbers and Jacob Parrish on the outside for Kansas State, but it's going to be a really fun matchup. I think it's one of those that you lean all this energy towards what Kansas State had did and what they are capable of doing this year, and then you look at BYU and you say, they're a pretty middle-of-the-road team. They're not necessarily someone to worry about. The second you walk into Provo, Utah, that changes. The second you walk into that stadium, everything changes. There's no longer, BYU is not so great of a team and KSU is more talented at every single position. That doesn't matter. Once you walk into that stadium, you better be ready to go punch for punch because BYU is going to give it to you. Now, I'm having a really hard time going against Kansas State right here just because I do think they found something last week and I have them as my champion in the Big 12, so I think they're going to get off to a nice start here. But overall, this is a game that you should be watching very closely, and maybe you'll come out of it a little bit surprised about how good this atmosphere is up there in Provo. But let's take our third break here, and then we'll get into all of the questions I have heading into Week 4, a number including one around Billy Napier that I want to get into right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the other big time games, a ranked matchup in Lincoln, Nebraska this Friday. Going to be so much fun, cannot wait for that one, and might just have a lot to do with what the Big Ten is going forward. But let's get into some questions around this upcoming weekend and just kind of around college football in general, because there's a number of things happening behind the scenes, and that's where we'll start. That is where we'll start. We'll start with Billy Napier, because there has been a number of stuff happening around him. Obviously, coming off the loss to A&M, it was almost assumed that he would be fired over the next 48 hours. In fact, I said very, very confidently on Monday that he would not be on the flight to Starkville. He will almost definitely be on the flight to Starkville, and that adds a very interesting debate to this because Pete Thamel was on SportsCenter a couple of days ago, and he said, it doesn't seem like the people inside this program have the same urgency to let Billy Napier go as the fan base does. And frankly, it's rarely that case. There's rarely an administration that is as inkling to get a guy out as the fan base is. But that being said, there's something to be said about him being the coach throughout the rest of the year. I know that sounds crazy where they have been the first couple of weeks, but this is a really complicated question that goes well beyond what he's done on the football field. Florida right now has an interim president. They have someone that likely could be the president going forward, but maybe you go out and find someone else. On the other side of this, they have a guy in Scott Strickland as their AD. He might not be around once that next president comes into town. So do you want to give him that power? Do you want him to give him the hiring power over your next football coach if he's not going to be around for that football coach to be around? So that's the big time question here. Do you ride Billy Napier until the very end? Do you say we're gonna take this year as a wash? We're gonna figure out what's going on with this program, but at the end of the day, he's going to be out the door. It's just going to have to be at the end of the year with all of the different stuff happening behind the scenes. Does make it a lot tougher. And then the other part of this question is obviously who would possibly take over for him and how would they go about that? Who would be the guy? Where would they turn? A lot of people have thrown out Lane Kiffin. I think he would take it. It's a lot of variables over there at Florida that we don't see right now that are a little bit worrisome. So there's so many different things that go into this. Eli Drinkwitz is another option. I think Glenn Schumann up there at Georgia, defensive coordinator, is an option. There's a number of guys out there. Florida's not at that position where they can just point at a guy and he will immediately take the job. That's not where they are right now. That's where they can be in a couple of years. But as of right now, this is a program that has just too much stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know if they can hire the next coach the way that a lot of people think they can. But that's obviously something we'll unpack the rest of the season. And if Billy Napier's on the sideline, we'll see what happens throughout the rest of the year. But it's going to be really, really interesting and one of those weird lame duck coach situations, and those rarely end well. I'll just leave it at that for the time being. But what game has changed the most from week 1? This is the funny thing that happens in week 4, week 5, where you have these games that you circle in the preseason. You have these games that say those are going to mean the most in week 3. Those are going to be the marquee matchups. And then you get here and they're totally different. And it's not necessarily to say they're not marquee matchups, but they're just a little bit different from terms of what we thought we were going to see. I think Clemson-NC State is a great example of this, where you have a team that was coming in with a lot of title hopes in NC State, Clemson trying to get back to where they were. I thought this was going to be one of the most important games in the ACC race all year, and maybe it still is to a certain extent, but as of right now, this NC State team comes in just limping a little bit, and I don't know if it's going to mean all that much at the end of the day if NC State keeps playing this way. And then you have a USC-Michigan game that obviously you have to touch on. This is going to be one of those games that's so much fun to watch, but also kind of a reversal of roles going into this game. I thought when we came into this game, I was going to be saying, Michigan is going to be the more solid team, the more confident team, the one that I know more about. USC is going to be the team that is still finding themselves defensively and maybe even offensively with Miller Moss taking over. That has not been the case. It's been entirely flipped. Michigan looks a little bit lost while USC looks like a well-oiled machine, and we'll see what happens in that one, but cannot believe that this one got as different as it did. But the winner of this challenge by a mile is the Cal-Florida State game. This is a game that coming into the season, you would have thought, okay, Florida State can get a quick win, they can keep on with their ACC title race, and that'll be that. Cal's walking in as they're not the favorite in the books, because rarely will you see Florida State not be a favorite at home, but they're the team that has the ACC odds. They're the team with the big-time wins. They're the team that has Florida State on the ropes before they walk into the stadium, and frankly, that's been the case for pretty much every single Florida State game thus far. So this is one of those games that you're looking at one totally different direction this going into the season, that now Cal's the aggressor, and Florida State's the one that's trying to tread water and trying to stay alive in this conference. So crazy stuff. Another one, obviously, Nebraska-Illinois is going to be tons of fun. I think Tennessee-OU changed quite a bit after this, after a lot of changes around Tennessee just becoming world beaters. Kansas-West Virginia felt like it could be for the Big 12 title. No longer. It feels like it's one that might just be forgotten about by the end of the year. The other question I have, are we crowning or burying teams just a little bit too fast? When we talk about this every single year, and really last year gave me a great argument for this, Bama was coming off the USF game this time last year. They were unsure who their quarterback was going forward. They knew that Jalen Milroe was the better quarterback. They didn't necessarily feel great about him going forward. Everyone was talking about how this is the worst Alabama team that we've seen. This is the team that is going to end, the run effectively. They're going to fall a couple of times in the regular season, especially after that Texas game. There was so much talk around them, and then they found it. Then they were able to hit that stride. Maybe that's Michigan this year. And I understand that they have quite a further way to go than what Alabama did a year ago, but what if Alex Orji just brings everything into alignment? And what if that's all they need? I know there's a number of issues with this team. They have to play Michigan football. The second they get back to Michigan football, at the very least, these kids will feel comfortable with what they're doing. These kids will know what they're doing going forward, and that's running the football. You're going to have to be able to run the football. You're going to have to play defense, and if you can't lean into that stuff, then you're going to have a problem. But I just think Michigan's one of those teams that has a little bit more in the tank than people are giving them credit for, and I cannot wait to see what they do the rest of the season. But overall, it's going to be absolutely incredible to watch. On the flip side of this, we might be crowning Tennessee just a touch too early. I think this Tennessee team is absolutely incredible and has every ability to make the CFP. The thing is, this is a very young quarterback that's about to go into his first year as a full starter in the SEC. This is a defense that is really good. the back end it does have a problem. When you go up against those elite offensive lines, are you going to be able to get home at the same rate? And if you can't, are your defense, is your back end going to get exposed? It's one of those teams that has played incredibly good football up to this point, no doubt about that. It hasn't been necessarily against great opponents, particularly defensively, and it hasn't necessarily been the aggressive atmospheres that Nico's going to walk into this weekend and going forward. So it's one of those teams that I feel really good about right now, but you have to then talk about the flip side. You have to talk about what could go wrong, and it might just be that star quarterback that has been so incredible through a couple of weeks looks a little clunky going forward. But it'll be interesting to watch that. What if the ACC is flipped on its head this Saturday? Because when you talk about the ACC, Clemson, NC State really does take the cake in terms of what's going to matter in the ACC race, but you have a number of other ones that could not only just mix this thing up just a little bit, but could flip it on its head entirely, where Georgia Tech heads up to Louisville. If Georgia Tech wins that game, things look a little bit different in that race from where we thought they were, at least as of right now. South Florida hosts Miami. If the Bulls get a win, then Miami is all over the place and you're very, very confused about what this conference is going forward. Cal and FSU might not be the best game in the world, but if Cal wins, they're a real contender in the conference. If Florida State gets it done, there will be a very interesting conversation around Florida State, a very confusing, weird conversation. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch all these games unfold. And then you have out-of-conference games. You have Virginia Tech hosting Rutgers. You have a number of you have TCU at SMU. You have Michigan State at Boston College. All games that could go against you and have a little bit of an impact down the road. So it's going to be a really interesting week in the ACC, and I think one that we might just look back on and say, that might have had more of a bearing on the ACC race than much any other week throughout the season. But obviously, plenty more to go. Let's get into who we learn the most about this weekend. And I think there's a number of different conversations here. I think SMU is a team that we have to learn more about. They have not played really good football, but everything's still on the table for them, and they got a big one against TCU this upcoming weekend. And then you got other teams. You got Colorado. You're going to learn a ton about this team this upcoming weekend, coming off an emotional win, coming off a week that has been a little bit crazy around that program, as it usually is, but a number of different things that have popped up. You're going to have to come ready. Dave Aranda is going to have his guys ready to roll, and you better be able to match their tune. So we're going to learn a lot about Colorado. They answered the bell last week. They're going to have to answer it again this week. And then I do think we're going to learn a ton about what Nico Iamaleava is. I think he is the guy that, frankly, more than anyone in the country, I'm watching the closest, because it's not necessarily about, I don't trust him to be elite. He's absolutely incredible. It is to say, first true road game, an elite defensive coordinator and defense overall on the other side, an intense, aggressive crowd. All of these things can get in your way. All of these things can get in his way and create problems that he hasn't had to deal with yet. It's not to say that that's definitely going to happen, but you never really know what these guys are going to react like in that first true road game. He's going to have to be able to keep his poise about him, or it's going to be kind of a long day at the office in the weirdest possible way, where an offense that looked like world beaters through the first couple of weeks might just look benign because this quarterback cannot fully get it going. So we'll learn a lot about him. If he rolls out there and just absolutely tears them to pieces, it's going to be a really interesting conversation, including Heisman, around this kid. And then on the flip side, if he, falls on his face just a little bit, I wouldn't be overly surprised. And it'd be one of those things that would be really interesting to watch going forward with Tennessee. But what's the most fun game of the weekend? And I'm going to start with a little bit of a sicko pick, I'll be honest with you. If you watch Florida State at Mississippi State, or if you watch Florida at Mississippi State, bless your soul. I don't know how you can watch these two teams right now. I don't know how these fan bases are even going to tune into this game. This is going to be one of the ugliest games in the world. That being said, it's going to be entertaining because these guys are going to make mistakes. There's going to be a lot of weird plays. There's going to be a lot of just craziness. And it's going to be kind of like the old analogy around a train wreck. You just can't look away. I think it might just be one of the most incredible train wrecks of the week 4. And with both these teams moving the way that they are, it's going to be fascinating to see who has more energy in this one. I'll be totally honest with you. And then you got Tennessee OU. I feel like we have to talk about this one. We talked about how incredible it was before. it can't be said enough. An elite offense on one side with Tennessee, elite defense on the other side. Great atmosphere, players that can make absolutely huge plays, narratives around this game, including the quarterback of the national championship team in 2000 coming back as a head coach. So many big-time things going into this game, and I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. Cannot wait for this one. Definitely the game that I'm probably the most excited about going into this week, but the most fun one falls to Arizona State, Texas Tech. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but these are two teams that cannot stop a lot of people. Arizona State's a little bit better at it, but they're not necessarily great at it. And then Texas Tech on the other side did a good job against North Texas this past week, but overall have not been solid stopping anything. And I think this is one of those games that you're going to tune in, see, the score be 14-14 at one moment. You'll tune in about 5 minutes later, it'll be 28-28. It'll flip that quickly. This game is absolutely incredible and cannot wait to see how many points they're going to put up in this one. And then some other ones, Georgia Tech at Louisville, I think is going to be awesome. Rutgers going down to Blacksburg to play Virginia Tech is going to be great. And then obviously USC Michigan, just maybe not the most exciting approach in that game if I had to imagine. But it'll be interesting to watch that unfold. Let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a Hot Take Thursday, break down all of the hot takes I have for Week 4, including there's a game tonight that's going to be downright really, really fun, so we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the questions heading into this week, including can Billy Napier just keep his job for the rest of the season? It's one of those things that you would think just based off the football results he would be gone pretty soon. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes at Florida that might get in the way of that, but obviously we'll break that down as it comes up. But let's get into my Hot Take Thursday. There are a number of different things I want to get on y'all's radar, and the biggest one I want to get on y'all's radar is a game that is happening tonight. South Florida is heading over to App State to play a game. This one's going to be awesome. I'll be totally honest with you guys. I know this one doesn't necessarily jump off the page when you're looking at the schedule, but Gio Lopez is a fantastic quarterback for South Alabama, caused so many troubles for defenses. On the other side, Joey Aguilar is a very solid quarterback for this team, is a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde type guy that'll have some of those boneheaded mistakes, but will also have some really remarkable plays. It's going to be really fun to watch this one. I think this is one of those games that you're going to see a lot of points, you're going to see a lot of craziness, and frankly, actually, I wanted to add this. One of my best bets for this week, over 62.5 in this game. I think both these defenses are a little bit all over the place, especially App State right about now, and I think they're going to be a very, very fun battle going into this one offensively. So am going to lean towards the over in this one. I think App State gets this one done, but I don't know. It's going to be a really, really fun matchup. App State has shown so many openings in their defense that can't necessarily feel totally confident about what they're doing right now. So an incredible game. Definitely tune into that one tonight. Who needs Thursday night football? Useless. South Alabama, App State is where I'm going to be for sure. But let's get into a couple others here. Michigan. I think they're going to come out of this week feeling much better. And this is kind of a hard thing to describe because I do have USC winning the game. So it's kind of a weird thing to go about this. But I do think this is one of those things where Michigan has been waiting for so long in this season, at least 3 games in this season, to just figure out who they are, to figure out who they want to be going forward, to figure out how they want to go about business offensively. Now they don't have the cop-out. Now they don't have the guy that they're trying to make another J.J. McCarthy. You don't have another one. You don't have a guy that is going to be able to make the elite level throws that JJ did. You just don't have that guy on that roster. What you do have is an athletic freak that can run the ball all over the field and create so many problems up front. Oh my goodness, I apologize. That can create so many problems up front and really just batter defenses, and that is Michigan football. When I think about Michigan over the past couple of years, it's never been about the quarterback. It's never been about the guy that's throwing the ball, and it's never really been about that guy throwing the ball all that often. Lean on Alex Orji. Lean on this run game, and then see where the chips fall in the pass game. You're not going to get better in the pass game. I can almost promise you that. What you might get is a little bit more efficient because you don't necessarily have those normal drop back scenarios where Davis Warren just has to rip it into an open space. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more nuanced, and plays off the run game a little bit more. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. I don't necessarily think this team is going to walk out there with a win. I do think they're going to walk out there with an identity, and that matters as much as anything else, and you'll move forward saying, at the very least, we can play this style of football and be competitive in this conference. We can play this style of football and maybe compete with Oregon, compete with Ohio State, and if you can get better at this style of football, then maybe you can beat those two teams. So I think it's one of those things that I don't have Michigan winning this game. I do have them gaining a lot of confidence in this game coming out of it. I think the ACC might just be a two-horse race at the end of this week. And this is one of those that I've kind of fought myself on just a little bit. But when you look at the ACC right now, Florida State, throw them by the wayside. They are done. NC State, Virginia Tech, SMU, they've missed the mark the first couple of weeks. And then you have a couple of teams that have come out of nowhere like Cal, Boston College, even Syracuse, although there were some people circling them going into the season. For me, I think Clemson's going to send a statement this weekend. I think NC State is walking in limping a little bit. I think Clemson found a little something in that App State game, and I think they're going to be able to take advantage of this defense. I think they're going to be able to make a little bit of a statement. I have them winning, I believe, by 18, 31-13, and I think they're just going to elevate themselves enough. Now, it's not to say that other teams can't get involved here. I do think there are other teams that absolutely will be in this conversation, but as I see it, I think Clemson will be able to send their message that they're up near the top of the conference, and then you have Miami already there. They're dominating this league right now. They're doing exactly what you'd expect them to do, and it's been really, really impressive. Right now, they're kind of on a tier of their own. I think Clemson could kind of join them there and leave everyone in the dust pretty quickly. But that is not to say, Louisville can't make noise. That isn't to say Boston College couldn't make noise, or Syracuse, or some of these other teams that are playing really good football right now. The way I look at it is Clemson and Miami working at their best possible ability, working, at 100% capacity, is always going to be better than Louisville working at 100% capacity. So I think Clemson will get a little bit closer to that. I think Miami's already there. And I think some of these teams that could play really good football, there's just going to be too big of a gap between them and Clemson for them to make it up. And then Diego Pavia, I think he's going to give Missouri a scare this weekend. And it sounds a little bit crazy coming off what we saw last week, but Missouri had a slow start against Boston College for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones was Thomas Castellanos was able to get out of the pocket and was able to make a couple of plays with his legs, and it made everything so much harder. Diego Pavia might be able to do that even better. He is such a instinctive, such a strong runner, and one of those guys that is going to cause problems for your defense. There's no two ways about that. I think he's a very, very talented kid, and one of those guys that they're coming off a really tough loss. I think he's someone that bounces back. I think he's someone that has a little bit of that swagger about him where he knows the second he steps on that field in Georgia State, he's not going to let the same thing happen the next time he steps on the field. Now, I still think this Missouri team is finding themselves a little bit. I think it'll go a little bit further in this game. I think they'll be able to find themselves a little bit more defensively. I just think they'll be able to get scared maybe into the third quarter. I don't know if it'll last all that long, but I do think it's going to take a minute for them to get rolling over there in Missouri, and I think Vandy is going to be able to at least give them a little bit of a scare in this one. And then finally, or not finally, but two 8 p.m. games are the show of the weekend, in my opinion, and I know this sounds crazy, but stick with me here. Michigan State, Boston College is a very, very fun game. Aiden Childs comes in as truly one of the craziest quarterbacks in the country right now because he likes to throw picks, and he likes to throw touchdowns. He has become kind of the Josh Allen of the college football world, and I love watching it. I'll be totally honest with you. It's incredible television. One of those guys that if he's on, I'm definitely tuning in. And then on the other side, Thomas Castellanos has become one of the appointment television players through the first couple of weeks. Absolutely love this player. I think he's so much fun to watch and cannot wait to see this quarterback matchup. And then you got another one, Baylor at Colorado. We talked about it earlier. It's a really, really fun game. It's going to be one of those games where Colorado is tested, where they're going to be punched in the mouth a couple of times. Maybe Daquan Finn can, really do incredible things against this defense and make some noise. There are a lot of things that go into this game that are going to be really, really fun to watch. So I know these 8 o'clock games maybe aren't the most important when it comes to the CFP, or maybe aren't the biggest things in the world. They're going to be really fun to watch. They're going to be games that I think might just come down to the wire, and I think you might just see a couple of upsets in this one. So it's going to be awesome to watch those two games among all the other craziness that is going to be going on during that night slate. But finally, I think a G5 hopeful for the CFP takes a huge hit this weekend. And we talked about this game earlier in the week, Memphis heading over to Navy. This is a dangerous game. Memphis coming off a very emotional win against Florida State. Navy's one of those teams that they fit the mold of what it means to get an upset. They run the ball, they chew clock, they make life tough on you, they don't make a lot of mistakes, and then you just got to figure out a way to beat them. It's not easy by any means, and I think there's a number of other examples, but Memphis is one I'd watch very closely this week. I think another one, Northern Illinois. They play a Buffalo team that is not great by any means. I'm not necessarily saying that, but it doesn't change that this Northern Illinois team has had 13 days to sit on that Notre Dame win. Maybe they come out a little bit rusty, and then maybe they come out a little bit slow in terms of the mental fortitude you need in this game. Maybe Buffalo can get out to a little bit of a lead, and they have a couple of guys on that defense, a couple of guys on that offense like Nick McMillan, and then guys like Jason Fuqua on the defensive side of the ball. They can make a couple of plays. It doesn't take a lot. You just got to make those couple of plays in this game, and maybe Northern Illinois, crashes right back down to earth this upcoming weekend. And then we talked about them. App State is absolutely one of those teams tonight. When you talk about South Alabama, they're going to be able to score. They're going to be able to score a ton, and it's going to create a number of problems for this team because I don't think App State wants to get into a shootout. I don't think that's the way they want to go about business, and if they have to, it could get really interesting. And then you have teams like USF that's playing Miami, could take a pretty big hit if they get absolutely dominated in that game. And then you have Toledo coming off a huge win heading up to Western Kentucky. That one's going to get really interesting. But overall, I think it's one of those things that we have so many teams that are in the Group of 5 race right about now. We have so many teams that are looking at it as a real possibility. Some of those teams aren't going to make it. In fact, a lot of those teams aren't going to make it. So it's going to be really interesting to see them kind of get weeded out. And frankly, I think it starts this week. I think one of those teams is going to fall where we don't expect them, and then they're likely out of that CFP race for the Group of 5 because right now it's gearing up to be, you got to be undefeated to make that thing. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that unfold and cannot wait to see what happens there. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport you could want. So if you're not just a college football guy like myself, if you love basketball, baseball, NFL football, tune into GSMC. We have you covered on every single one of those fronts. So definitely going to be a really, really fun week ahead of us, and we will be back for a couple more mini breakdowns tomorrow. So definitely check that out. We'll be back tomorrow, and we will see you then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.